In this video, I will show you how to crop and rotate images in Adobe Lightroom CC. Cropping can remove any unwanted elements on the edges of your photos, it can exclude unnecessary negative space, and it can help make for a more dynamic composition using the rule of thirds. So I'm going to start with this image of Puppy the cat. Yes, you heard me correctly. And I want to focus on Puppy the cat. I want to get rid of this clump of grass that's on the side here. So in order to do that, I'm going to go up to the column on the far right, and I'll select the second tool, which is the Crop and Rotate tool. Click on the icon, and it will open up this panel. You'll see a bounding box around your photo. You can click and drag on the corners to decrease the box. You can grab on any side of the corner, and the area that is grayed out and dimmed is going to be cut away when you hit the return or enter key on your keyboard. You also have the option of clicking on the photo itself and dragging it and placing it within the bounding box. So I'll hit return on my keyboard, and now it has brought up the image with the new crop. However, in my opinion, I don't think it improved the composition. So I'm going to go back up to the crop and click on the icon and notice that the rest of my photo is still there. So you can always go back and adjust the crop if needed. And you don't have to click on just the bounding box. You also have some other options over in the panel. Let's take a look at the aspect ratio. This opens up a lot of choices. And as shot and original are going to keep the same height and width ratio as it was set when you took the photo. But notice that custom releases this lock and allows you to adjust the height and width separately. So these numbers are very, very common ratios, and you might recognize some of them. For instance, 1:1, that's the form that you might use for Instagram, and 1920 by 1080, you might recognize that one from film. But if you want it to be a landscape or portrait, you can click on this button to rotate that aspect ratio. But for Puppy, I think this photo will use the 1:1 ratio. And even though you've locked in that aspect ratio, you can still change the proportion and make it larger or smaller using the bounding box. I'll click return on my keyboard, and there, excellent. I think that looks much better. So cropping can also be used to remove unwanted negative space. This time I'm going to choose this photo of Josie the dog, who almost gets lost in this photo. I want to make her the focal point. So I'm going to use the crop tool to remove some of the rocks and plants on the left-hand side. And I'll choose to change this from original, since I don't want to be locked into a ratio, to custom, and that will allow me to change each individual side on its own without relation to the other. And now crop is almost acting like a zoom, making Josie stand out more. But this panel also has rotate tools in case your photo is imported sideways and you might need to rotate it, or you can flip it horizontally or vertically. For instance, you might want your viewer's eye to move from the left to the right, particularly in the West, since it mimics reading. So you may prefer to use a flipped image. You can also use the rule of thirds when cropping. You may have noticed these light gray vertical and horizontal lines creating 9 rectangles, and many cameras come with the same grid that you can turn on in settings and use when you take your photos. But the rule of thirds says that you should place your focal point where the lines cross on that grid in these 4 areas. For portraiture, you want to place the subject's eyes along the top horizon line. This is called headroom. And in landscape, horizon lines look nice on either horizontal line. Though the rule of thirds is pretty standard in photography, it doesn't mean you always have to use it. Let's take a look at Diego the tortoise, for example. So here is Diego hiding in his little spot. And so I'll try with the cropping tool to use the rule of thirds on this image. I'll make it custom and drag the bounding box. And I'm not even quite sure, he's such a big part of the photo, not even quite sure where to line up the crosshairs of the box. So something like that. But I actually don't think this makes for a better composition. So you can always reset your crops by clicking that icon. And I like that he is centered and balanced by either side, the rocks on the left and the plants on the right. So if you're shooting a subject that has symmetrical or radial balance and the center of the frame makes for a better composition, then go for it. And lastly, I'd like to show you looking or walking room. For that, we'll use this image of a great blue heron. I don't know its name, so I'll call it Alex. So looking or walking room is the amount of space between the subject and the edge of the picture plane, the edge that they are facing. So ideally, Alex should have more room in front than behind. So we'll cut out the extra space and try to line up Alex with our rule of thirds. But if we bring down the top, we've cut off any headroom or head space. So you always want to lift up and have a little space above your subject matter's head. Now if we move to the other side, and now we're cutting off Alex on the right-hand side, not giving Alex a lot of looking or walking room, that is said that it will now look odd, off balance, or as though your subject matter is trapped in the picture plane. Would you agree that's what it looks like? So those are the reasons for the rule of thirds and having headroom, looking, or walking room within your composition. But you know what they say, rules are often meant to be broken. Now that you know the rules, you'll know when to break them to make a good composition. I'm going to export this image of Alex and put it in my Creative Cloud files in the folder for this unit. I'll collapse Lightroom and open up that Creative Cloud folder. Once Alex has been synced, I can select the before and after crop images, push the spacebar, and now I can compare and contrast and decide if I want to keep the crop or change it to something different. So that is how you crop and rotate images in Adobe Lightroom CC.